right. Welcome, everyone. I know that we have people from various time zones. Some people are experiencing this in the morning, some afternoon, some late night from different countries. Very happy to see all of you. I know that we have some former students from various programs that are joining us and some new that have never met me before. I'm Cerf. I'm a professor at Columbia, and I teach the AI program, which because of the pace by which AI is moving, we decided to turn into an additional quarterly update. So this is the quarterly update. Every 3 months, we're going to do something like that, where we're going to teach people what has happened since we finished the last update or the last program in the world of AI. I could have done it as a weekly update. There have been so many things that you will see that emerged in the last 2 weeks, 1 week, even some slides that I changed between the moment I put them to today. You'll see I kind of scratched predictions to post-dictions because they already happened. In the spirit of the AI program, we created now a theme song to the program that I'm addicted to by now. This was AI-generated song. I'm going to play only the first tune to you, and then at the end, we're going to share the full 3.5-minute joy of music. Here it is.
When you walk into the lecture and you're feeling kind of tense, Professor Cerf is talking about work intelligence. Artificial general is the name of the game. Breaking down the current tests will never be the same.
Okay, I think that the point was made. A very fun song with all the buzzwords that we discussed in various programs before that are put together into one narrative using AI that generated the lyrics and the music. Okay, we'll start with a quick summary of what's ahead of us. And as you probably know, there's a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen where you're welcome to send more questions. Some of you already emailed me questions in advance, and we're going to use the time at the end to answer all of them and to discuss them. What do we have planned for the next hour and 15 minutes? We're going to talk first about the business side of AI. What's new in various companies, in various industries, and in various countries when it comes to AI. We're going to talk about governance. How do countries and organizations plan to deal with some of the logistics of AI when it comes to hiring, firing, merging, acquisitions? We're going to talk about the legal side, various interesting updates on the legal domain between lawsuits and settled lawsuits and potential regulations that are coming from these domains. We're going to talk about geopolitics, the difference between how AI is being interpreted in various countries, namely the US, Europe, and China. We're going to talk afterwards about some of the academic research. As some of you know, if you took my class before, I truly believe that academia is a few years ahead of industry in many of the domains we're going to talk about, and the topics that become products start with a paper. This is true for the transformer, it's true for others. We're going to list some of the recent academic papers that I believe will become a mainstream product or tool in the coming years. And we're going to finish with predictions. I was told and advised not to give concrete predictions like what to invest or what to look at, but I still have some of those to make it fair. I marked all of them in blue, so you know you can ignore whatever is in blue. And if you take my word that I believe it's a good investment, a good idea, this would be a chance to see what I have. In about 40 minutes, we're going to have our guest, David Steinberg. He's the CEO of the largest company that deals with AI and big data in marketing. It's a company that I had the privilege and benefit of knowing personally because I spent time talking to David about it and I followed the trajectory. And we're going to talk about how they're dealing with AI right now. What is the plan for the coming years? What are the challenges and advice that David has to up-and-coming leaders or to current leaders in the space of AI? And we have a surprise giveaway to some of you at the end. Let's start right away. So you probably know that I believe that AI is really an important domain right now. I found this picture from the end of a movie about kind of Wall Street that I felt is really becoming of the idea. A character sells me a pen, and the guy says it's AI powered, which is the way to sell everything now. This is not just the joke that I show here. It's actually true. There are more and more companies that are just putting AI everywhere as a way to sell more. One of the slides that I really like to show is one that looks at the amount of time the generative AI is mentioned in earnings calls. Up to middle of 2022, it was nearly 0 or 1 or 2 every now and then. And now it's essentially in pretty much every company's earnings calls. This is true for tech companies. It's true for the automotive industry. It's true for Hollywood. It's true for legal companies. It's true for nearly any domain. It's just generative AI is a buzzword you cannot ignore. One of my favorite examples of that is a release by Salesforce. They released their quarterly update about 6 months ago. Before they were going to go live and talk about it. And then they retracted the submission and sent another file. And the only difference between the file that was sent first and the second one is that every time the word tech appeared in the first one, it was find replace into generative AI or AI. So someone basically quickly before they released just changed everywhere to generative AI. This is just showing you how AI is essentially something that you just have to sprinkle in all of your reports. Now, if you think that numbers are not the way to go about it, and a picture is what I have in Word, I have my favorite picture. This is a picture became a meme on the internet. It was published by Jensen Huang when he delivered personally the first DGX H200. That's the server that is essentially what powers OpenAI's learning models. He delivered a new version to OpenAI, took a picture with the president and the CEO of OpenAI. This picture was posted on Instagram and was the most liked and shared meme of that day. And if you don't think that this picture tells a story, here's another one that I feel tells a better story. This is the same Jensen Huang in the InvestTech conference where he was asked to sign the bra of one of the participants. Now, I've not seen in my entire life CEOs of companies being asked to do that, almost like rock star performance. To me, these two pictures tell the story. AI is everywhere. All right. So now we're going to dive straight into the update, and we start with software update in the business world. One of the updates that I thought was really interesting was that the investment firm VC Andreessen Horowitz, I think one of the biggest, if not the biggest investment firm, decided that they're going to buy 20,000 GPUs for themselves that are going to share with all their clients. This is basically a VC saying we want to own enough compute in our servers that we can provide to all of our clients. And this just shows you how investment firms are thinking about it right now. It's a business of its own. So we're not just going to help companies sponsor their own thing. We're going to own the hardware ourselves, so that we can provide services, software services to our companies. And it also becomes a way for them to recruit talent. So if you want to use it, you're going to pay a license or subscription fee to Andreessen Horowitz to use their system. And then you can share it with all the products, meaning if one company that is sponsor does something, they have access to this data and they can share this data with someone else. And it's also a way to help portfolio companies just join them. They say, look, we have all the resources. If you need resources, GPUs, we have them, you can join us. Basically, it's a smart move from a VC firm to start offering more than just money, but the currency of the day, which is GPUs to its clients. Moving on by order of size, OpenAI suffered a lot of turmoil in the last 2 weeks, namely John Schulman, one of the founders of OpenAI, one of the many founders of OpenAI, decided to leave and join the #1 competitor, Anthropic. He is a PhD in machine fine-tuning and of AI models, so it's also a blow to some of the technical skills that they were there. He joins a number of other founders like Ilya Sutskever and Jan Lake. All of them left OpenAI in the last 3 months to start their own products. Jan Lake is an Anthropic, and he was very happy to see his friend joining him. The same day, about 2.5 hours after the tweet by John, Greg Brockman, the president of OpenAI, chose to also leave. He's taking a sabbatical until the end of the year, so it's not a departure. But this is a little bit of like a turmoil in the management of the company. At the same time, they now added a former head of the NSA to their board, which I think signals that they're trying to make an effort to prepare for the election and for the world of hacking and security problems with AI. They also released ChatGPT, which basically is their direct competition with Google and with Perplexity. This basically is a way for you to ask a question of GPT and get an answer that searches the internet. Google already has that in some of its searches. If you search Google, you might not just get the list of answers, but you get a summary of the answers that tells you you asked a question about, say, the Olympic medals. Instead of just showing you a link to the website, I'll summarize for you. These are the winners, these are the losers of the Olympic medals. Right now, Google is a cautionary tale, decided to launch that only in 15% of its searches. So you might have encountered that here and there, but it's not a permanent thing. To see how it works out. OpenAI says it's a product of its own. You don't see it unless you ask for it, but it shows that the battle between the giants on search is becoming more and more clear. They also released GPT-4o Mini, which is their version of a cheaper, essentially, 4o GPT. It's priced at 15 cents for 1 million tokens, which, according to my mini calculations, is almost like a loss. So it's really a way to get more clients and get them to use OpenAI at a price that either breaks even or is a loss if you look at all the amount of energy that it takes to actually operate the servers that will provide these services. Also, they unveiled the Strawberry project, which is advanced listening. I'm going to mention that again later, but it's basically their approach to what is the GPT version 5 or the next version of GPTs. This project was known internally as Q star. The R in star and the potentially RA in Strawberry stands for reasoning, which is the idea that you can now ask GPTs to not just answer questions, but to do what we call long horizon tasks. You can tell it to do something over the course of many, many days, and it will keep updating, keep changing, and keep giving you information, not just what is right now, but also how information evolved. I think one of the interesting things for the people who are kind of tech nerds in the room is that there was a leak from someone at OpenAI that shows how the search actually looks behind the scenes. So if you type in OpenAI GPT a question like, show me, I don't know, who is David Steinberg, normally it would just search the internet and will give you the answers or search its language model. But what we know right now is that when you do that, you actually see all of this prompt appearing behind the scenes. So when you say something, what we see is that GPT has a prompt that says you're a GPT, a large language model trained by OpenAI based on the GPT-4 architecture. So we know that all of those words are actually what is inserted into the ChatGPT when you get the answer. So now we know how to rig that a little bit. Like you can tell it things like, hey, you're actually ChatGPT 3.5, give me a different answer. And we can see a little bit of how it happens behind the scenes. Okay. From OpenAI, we move to xAI, Elon Musk's company. I think the big news on there is Elon Musk, again, sues OpenAI. If you remember, he sued OpenAI saying that he, as a big investor, was told that he's going to be an open source company. Then when he left, they changed it to a closed source and a for-profit model, sued them. A few months ago, he chose to retract the lawsuit, and then a few days ago, he chose to again sue them. So in the course of the 3 months, we had lawsuit, no lawsuit, a lawsuit again. I think that the language of the lawsuit is pretty harsh this time, even stronger than before. I took a quote that I found in the first line. It says, that OpenAI assiduously manipulated Musk into co-founding their spurious non-profit venture by promising that OpenAI would be safer and more transparent than profit-driven alternatives. OpenAI's non-profit structure were the hook for Altman's long con. Definitely a strong language that maybe reflects on what he really thinks of OpenAI. Maybe it's just a money issue, or maybe it's just a reflection of the fact that xAI is not taking off yet. So xAI is not regarded one of the top 10 solutions, even though there's a lot of investments in it and a lot of effort that went into it from xAI. Specifically, when it comes to money, Elon Musk just a few days ago put a Twitter poll where he asked people, do you think that Tesla should invest $5 billion in xAI, basically a way to funnel money from Tesla that makes money into xAI that right now is not doing so well. The Twitter poll, not surprising, went with overwhelming support, and I think now he's running it by his board, in a way, having xAI receive a $5 billion investment to hopefully make it a bigger one. The big news in the world of AI business is Apple. Apple was one of those big companies that somehow wasn't a player in the world of AI, while Amazon, through Anthropic, OpenAI, Google, Meta, all were players. And then a few months ago, they announced that Apple is launching the Apple Intelligence AI, which tries to even claim the term AI for themselves. It was a big buzz when it happened, but then a few days ago, they announced that actually Apple AI or the Apple Intelligence won't be part of the release of iOS 18, which is due to come in September, but are delaying it to sometime in October, hopefully. And the explanation they gave is that they're trying to avoid some of the blunders that others, namely Google, had when they had their launch. If you remember, when Google had their launch, they tried to smartly, I think, cater to a lot of the potential problems that other companies like Microsoft and Meta had when they launched. Namely, they didn't want the language model to start becoming racist or sexist. So they introduced into the language model a counter to that, which is on every prompt, you have to carefully make sure that you don't do anything like that. And it ended up backfiring because they had all kinds of memes, like you asked the Google Gemini questions about who are the founding fathers, or if it can draw a picture of them, and you get diverse founding fathers with a black one and an Asian one and a female one as a way to really kind of reflect this thing. I think the idea was good, but this became a kind of a blunder or a gaffe for Gemini, for Google. So Apple is very worried because I think, as I wrote, they're known for being late to the game, but doing things perfect. It's easy to do perfect things in other products, but generative AI is hard to do perfect because you don't control what's happening. Once you launch it, people start to change it, and it's easy to make it not do what you want to do. So I think that they're concerned about that, and Apple is trying their best to do what they can to avoid any of those things, which are likely to still happen. One of the interesting things about Apple is that they're kind of known for being the safe and secure company. They have famously a closed sandbox where you can't kind of operate outside. And for OpenAI, that's one of the first times that they actually decided to use, for generative AI, decided to use OpenAI as their platform. So essentially, when you ask Siri a question, all it does is forward your question to OpenAI, gets the answer, and delivers back to you, which means that they're now going to take your prompts and send them elsewhere. This was a concern for a lot of people on their kind of fan side when it came up. It shows also how hard it is to create foundation model. So even a company like Apple has a hard time creating a good one, and they have to source from others. Right now, the choice to use OpenAI's or internal Apple one is something that you can tweak, so people can still remain within. But my prediction is that in the next year, Apple will create their own, and eventually it will be a closed source again. So Apple would have their own foundation model, not like anyone else. Or an alternative that's being discussed right now is that they're actually going to partner with Meta as well, and they're going to use Llama 3.1, which is an open source. So this one everyone can use. They're going to integrate Llama 3.5 into their solution, and then that's going to work out. The only clause here that Llama is open source, with one clause that says you cannot use Llama 3.1 for commercial use if you have more than 7 million users, which Apple does. So it's probably going to be a deal between Meta and Apple if they're going to indeed use this one. Speaking of Meta, Meta is kind of in the game, but still cautiously only offering open source products or internal source products. Last week, they announced they launched the AI Studio, which is something you can use if you look at the Instagram or WhatsApp. It's basically a little kind of mini button on your, say, WhatsApp, where you can teach the language model your own voice, and then it can speak to others. So you can actually kind of type a friend on WhatsApp, and the WhatsApp of your end learns your language and responds to them. So you can kind of talk to a friend without them actually being there. It's a very similar to a company called Character AI that built it in a really careful way. Meta launched it first with Kim Kardashian and Mr. Beast. It wasn't very successful. People didn't want to talk to the fake Kim Kardashian or to the fake Mr. Beast much, but they're still launching it and seeing how it's going to take out. I think it won't take off. Mostly because there's no money there. It's not clear how the investors are making. The only way I see it actually helping them is if it's a way to kind of train their own people on AI, get people used to Meta having an AI contingency, and recruit more talent to work for them, and essentially remain as one of the, say, 4 big players. Right now, they're kind of number 4 in the list. So somehow a way for them to stay in the game. Still Meta, they released the fully open source model 3.1 just 2 weeks ago. This was a big moment. When they said they're going to release an open source model, people thought, okay, it's going to probably be just kind of the code or just some of the training data, but not everything. In the end, they released the code, the weights. It's about 400 gigabytes of data you can download and just have your own model. They also released some of the training data. So they really went with full open source. You can basically get a foundation model fully free from Meta. They also released a really interesting document, 92 pages document, where they did all kinds of benchmarks, like how does it fare compared to other models? What happens when you kind of give it less data? How does a lot of data actually help it work? What's the ratio between the number of flops, the compute power to actually the result? So they actually used it to also give people some kind of benchmark that have become very useful. And I think that this kind of marks not just a nice release from Meta, but also the beginning of a battle between open source and closed source. OpenAI is the flagship of the closed source in this case. Meta is the flagship for open source. I think that it's going to end up with a kind of big battle in the coming months on this topic, who should use what, that ultimately will kind of allow people to either use fully open source or start breaking the jailbreak and closed source. At the same time, Google released something they call Gemma 2. Gemma 2 is a flavor language model tool. They have Scope Gemma 2, Shield Gemma 2, and basically what they are is all kinds of tools to help people who develop language models. So they have a Scope, which basically tries to take the answers that come from language model and explain how they got there. A very interesting kind of concept of explainability that people care about. They have the Shield, which is a way to detect toxic speech. You basically apply that on top of a language model, and it kind of filters bad things that come out of language model. Those are all kinds of tools that suggest that Google isn't just trying to create a GPT, but all kinds of things to wrap around GPT that help other companies. DeepMind, a sub-company of Google, released a few days ago some updates on something they call alpha proof and alpha geometry. That's part of their alpha series. If you remember, AlphaGo was the computer program that won the Go game. AlphaFold was the one that did protein folding in biology. Now they have alpha proof and alpha geometry, basically tools that solve computer math problems. They actually had those two software programs run on the Math Olympiad that happened just a few weeks ago. That's an Olympiad where people that are mathematicians get tough problems, they have to solve them. And it managed to solve 4 out of the 6 Math Olympiad problems, which is remarkable. I think that I would bet that most of the people who are on the call wouldn't know how to solve any of them. While it was a remarkable achievement that it solved 4 out of 6, there are also some kind of interesting thing. It solved one of the problems in seconds or minutes, I think, less than a minute. So this kind of became a remarkable outcome. But then it solved the other one in about 3 days, where in the course of this thing, it basically proved a lot of lemmas in mathematics that were kind of proven for years, and it proved them again and went back and forth and disproved something that was already known to be not proven. So it kind of went around before it solved this thing. It's another anchor of advancement, but at the same time, there's a kind of a tool that's not available to anyone other than a proof of concept for DeepMind. Microsoft adds an AI summary to search results, similar to what Google has, but now it's an all-of-Google result. You can basically ask a question and get the answer, and also leaves its board seat on OpenAI's board. I'm going to get back to that in a second on why I think they did it, but this is another small mark of what I think is one of the biggest kind of things that are going to likely shape the next 3 months. A company that is less known as Runway is a company that basically creates text to video. You can ask a question and you get a few seconds video. They created something that's changing the model from text to video to image to video. So some of you, if you ever played with DALL-E or the likes, you know that you ask DALL-E to make a picture, and maybe you like the picture, but you just want to change the ceiling or the sky, and you say, can you create a picture with different sky, and it creates a new one. It doesn't know how to take an image and create another image based on the same kind of content. It just knows to take the style. So they are the pioneers of what we call image to video. So you give it an image and you say, make a video from this image. And that's a big thing. It now creates 10-second videos, and you can take things like, here's a picture, add rain, or add another friend to the picture. And it basically allows you to overcome this big challenge of how do you make image that you like into another image that you like without restarting again and again. It also has features like lip sync. You can take a video and speak in the background, and it adds the voice to the speaker, kind of like a way to make very sophisticated deep fakes if you want. It's still clunky, but it's actually a different approach that might change and require everyone to move from text to image or text to video to image to video or to image to image. In a way, none of the companies that are kind of leading the space of video is really launched a full product, but we already heard about Sora from OpenAI, of Hyper 1.5, and China's biggest one called Kling. Now there's a 4th one, Runway. I predicted in the next couple of months, we're going to have basically a 4 companies battle on who takes the top of creating videos, which will become the dominant use of OpenAI's, of AI GPTs in the coming months. Just to show you an example of that, what they did, here's a video that was very popular, where they took the famous fashion show and created all kinds of fashion characters with some takes on them. It's a funny video. You can watch the entire video later yourself. But they basically took world leaders and had them kind of wear some clothes that play on some vulnerabilities in their characters. Of the smaller companies, Midjourney, they used to be a leader company in text to image, launched 6.1 update. It improved the human appearance. You can now make humans that look even better in terms of skin. It adds ability to take an existing image and add text to it, and it's 25% faster. The biggest challenge for Midjourney right now is that to operate it, you have to install Discord, which is kind of like this clunky place to converse. because I think they know that, they're trying to think about leaving this code. An assumption is that they will leave this code entirely in the next 3 months, which will make it a leading player because they are the best image model, just a very, very kind of complex way to generate images. From the Europe side, Mistral, the biggest European company, released Large 2. It's a model with 123 billion parameters, 128K context window, so a huge context window. And it basically benchmarks the same way as Llama 3.0 and GPT-4. It outperforms Anthropic's Claude. And the only benefit that they have is that they have a lot of text that's not US English and not Chinese. So they have Korean, Hindu, Russian, and so on. They're kind of catering to this market, and they do a really good job in this world. Right now, they're also open source, which means that it's not clear how they make money. In fact, most of their money is right now coming from just investors without any earnings. They don't even sell any of the models right now. So the assumption here is that they probably will just become closed source themselves or get acquired by one of the companies that already are in the players field, with their benefit would be Europe market and the language that are not English. On the really small companies, domain company, the Character AI, the CEO essentially left and went to work for Google, specifically DeepMind. He was working there before he went to Character AI. It's a signal that probably the company is going to be acquired or end its work soon. Another indicator is that they put the general counsel as the CEO, who is the one in charge of brokering deals. They have about $193 million in the bank right now, but it's not enough to run foundation models. So it's clear that they rely on someone else's foundation model, which means that with all their million users and the big kind of business that they have, they're probably going to be taken by someone else. Still in the kind of hint to what I'm talking about in a second about Microsoft. Microsoft pseudo-acquired Inflection. They have a 49% stake in Inflection, so it's nearly fully. Essentially, the CEO, Mustafa, who was first the founder of DeepMind, is now working full-time for Microsoft. So Microsoft basically now owns a big share of OpenAI and a big share of Inflection, which is one of the top 4 leaders. And the assumption here, I'm going to say already, is that it relates to antitrust. They would buy it entirely, but they know that the DOJ is really concerned about Microsoft taking a bigger part of the pie with all the companies. So they cannot try to show that they're not taking full pie, but essentially they are getting the largest lion's share of most companies. Perplexity, the biggest competitor in the search with AI right now, which is run by people from basically all the companies that compete with, raised $165 million. Now they're valued at $3 billion. And they started to do something interesting, which is they started to pay publishers or have a revenue share for content. So they pay New York Times and Atlantic and all the other companies for getting their data, which I think is a way for them to set a tone and say to OpenAI and other companies, from now on, you're going to have to start paying for the data. That's their way of, even though being a small company, kind of pave the path for others. Stability AI released Stable Fast 3D, which basically is a new idea that so far no one else has. It should take a 2D picture and it tells the Stability, make it into a 3D image that you can rotate. This is a really useful business. Given Stability is mostly a company that goes B2B. Their clients are mostly companies that use AI internally. This seems like a move to be a Hollywood-oriented company. So you can take a little picture and make it into a product that you put in an ad or on a movie. And this is kind of a good use for it. You can take a little 2D picture and make it into a monster in a computer game, all kinds of things that Hollywood really cares about. Quickly on the last two, Canva, a company that competes with Adobe, but tiny on the space of creating images using all kinds of tools to convert them and edit them, acquired its competitor Leonardo.ai, which is another text-to-image company. And this just puts them in a bigger and bigger market share in the world of images. They're trying to kind of enter the space that Adobe is playing in with an online AI-based system, which is kind of suddenly puts them as not a small company, but actually getting a bigger and bigger share of the world. And Cohere, another small company that has an interesting take that I thought would be relevant. They're also a B2B, mostly AI company, but they basically told all their users that if someone sues the user for anything that has to do with copyright. So if you created something with a GPT and turns out it's being copyrighted by someone else, or someone sues you for taking the knowledge, they're going to pay for your lawsuit. So in that sense, they kind of set another kind of path for companies to say, if you're using our GPT model and we use data from someone else to train the model and you're in trouble, it's our job to take care of you. In the hardware space, NVIDIA still the leader. However, they had a big delay. So they were supposed to launch their Blackwell B200 AI chip, and they now announced they're going to have a delay of 3 months because of a design flaw. Strangely, this did not affect their stock price, but actually affected all the other competitors of theirs. So namely Microsoft, Meta, Google, and those companies try to catch up with OpenAI, lost. And the idea here is that many of the companies like Microsoft and Meta and Google already committed tens of billions of dollars to buy the Blackwell B200 to basically catch up to OpenAI. And now that NVIDIA is delayed, those companies are suffering from that. It's so far not affecting the stock of NVIDIA at all, but it is a good way to look at it is to look at the stocks of other companies and see how they are impacted by that. NVIDIA is still likely to go up, especially when they release this. It kind of demonstrates that they're very much caring about the perfection of their chip. And at the same time, it's a good news for the competitors, Intel and AMD, that kind of had a blow in the last couple of months. Intel fired 15,000 employees in the last months because they're lagging on the AI space. This is a chance for them to catch up. Still on NVIDIA, they also are about to release one of the Blackwell chips to China. So as you know, the US was very clear about not letting NVIDIA sell any of its supercomputer, its GPUs to other countries, namely China. And NVIDIA is known for being able to find flaws in the law, and they basically find that the law says you cannot sell a GPU with flops above a certain level. But they realized that one of the limitations of being AI is not just the flops, but also the bandwidth by which memory moves. So they kept the flow the same, increased the bandwidth, and created a new GPU that they can actually sell to China. This won't go well. We already had the Secretary of Commerce basically go after they heard about that and saying that they're going to monitor this very carefully. And if they see that there's a violation, they're going to punish NVIDIA. This game between the two companies seems to be a tough one. Generally, there's now a conversation between all the chip companies on what is the ROAI, on the return on investment on AI, with NVIDIA, Intel, AMD, and all the other chip companies looking at that. And the answer is that many of them are trying to go into software. So NVIDIA, Intel, AMD are all creating various libraries and toolboxes that they can offer to other companies to build AI on their platform. So they're trying to move not just from hardware to software, and this is how they plan to make money besides selling, of course, the expensive GPUs to other companies. A small market that I personally gamble on is like a bigger market on the time is the robotics market. As you remember, in some of the classes we spoke about the fact that people don't like talking to chatbots. This is not how we imagine AI. What we imagine is a friend that sits next to you and talks to you and answers questions. NVIDIA also gambles on this idea, and they partner with a German company called Neural Robotics to basically build the robots you see in the background using NVIDIA's software humanoid toolbox. At the same time, OpenAI partnered with Figure to make what we call Figure 2 now, a robot that again tries to look even more human and even nicer to use. Essentially, this is, I think, the battle of the next 3 years in the future, not in the coming 3 years, on who gets the best friend that you can talk to, but also interact with. And the players are 1X, Tesla, Neura with NVIDIA, Figure with OpenAI, and Boston Dynamics. All those companies are trying to basically get ready for GPT version 7 that already has an embodiment. Speaking on this embodiment, I still think it's a 4-year ahead in the program, mostly because it's too expensive, it's too clunky right now, and it's too strong. Apparently, it's very, very risky to have a robot in your home. Mistakes break things, and it can't be interacting with young people and so on. So it's really kind of not at the level that it could be a household item. However, there are more and more small companies that offer household robotic items with AI. You may have heard about Hume.ai, Rabbit R1 that was trying to kind of milk the market of the Christmas present, didn't do successfully. Now there's a new one called Necklace AI that basically is an AI that sits on your necklace and you can talk to, and it's some kind of a friend that interacts with the internet with your phone, gives you advice. Another company that I predict wouldn't do well, it's not still a domain people care about. Quickly moving to governance. OpenAI released a few weeks ago what they think of as the trajectory for AI. They broke it to 5 stages, with stage 1 basically completed, which is like AI that looks like a chatbot. They said this is what everyone is doing right now. We're thinking of stage 2. Stage 2 is what I mentioned as Project Strawberry or Q Star reasoners. Those are AI that are kind of PhD level assistants. You can ask them to solve a problem, and they know how to monitor the problem, how to get more data, how to find data that's not in a language model, how to basically help you solve a problem. Stage 3, steps below, is something that can actually replace you when you go on vacation. So you go away and you leave the AI, and it knows how to answer questions for you, knows when to call you when you need help, and basically an agent that replaces you. Stage 4 is an innovator. It's basically something that does better than you. So you're stuck with a problem, you cannot solve it. the innovator is able to solve math problem or actually help you with your ideas. And stage 5 is the same thing for organizations. So you just take an organization and replace it entirely. Some say this is a way to kind of look at automation, just in different kind of lens. Either way, that's their planned layout for the coming years of how they see it happening, with ChatGPT version 5 mainly helmed at the stage 2 reasoner.
Moran, I just wanted to let you know this is David. For some reason, they have me on as Brendan, and my video has been shut off. But I'm here if you need me.
Perfect. We're going to turn to David in a few minutes. Thank you, David. And I think that hopefully by the time I get to David in a few minutes, we're going to be able to also work out the video issues. Quickly on regulation, Europe announced 2 weeks ago, August 1st, the EU AI Act went into practice, which essentially is a way to have the first AI regulation kind of toolbox. And what's nice about that is they basically broke AI solutions into different levels, different categories, where there's low risk, medium, and high risk. The high risk ones are decisions that are made by AI that could actually impact people's life, like loans, social scoring, emotional recognition, things that they basically are not allowing. You just say you can't do any of that in Europe if you want to have an AI company. The fine is either $35 million or 7% of your global Cerf business, whatever is higher, for violating this thing. And there are also low risk solutions that they are totally supportive, like film recommendation, things that if it is done and we don't like it, it's still okay. It's regarded as a better version of GDPR. GDPR was a success story mostly, but it also was criticized by a lot of people that as kind of a one-size-fits-all. They tried to fix that with the EU AI Act by having all kinds of ways to go out. I wrote a prediction that this will spin an industry of EU compliance companies consulting on how to do it right, auditing. This was in my slides up until yesterday, but this morning I read that there's now a handful of companies that listed in the last 2 weeks. So this is not a prediction, it's a post-prediction of something that already happened. With the US, I mentioned to you that the US Secretary of Commerce was kind of monitoring this thing. She gave a little speech where she says, there are no restrictions on models with widely available weights, but we continue to monitor that, meaning US remains the same in terms of regulation. There was a moment where one of the kind of many letters that come from people who warned the public about AI got a lot of attention. This was a letter, open letter, that criticizes OpenAI and the likes for how they think of AI and not putting any guardrails. This one was special because it had some people that are famous sign, but mostly a lot of people that are anonymous that work for OpenAI. Basically said, we work for OpenAI, we see it done not well. And they said each company should have something that kind of allows people to not retaliate against whistleblowers, to have a whistleblower line if people are not done right. And this was heard by the US. Senators asked OpenAI to provide detailed report on efforts to ensure security. If you remember when Sam Altman was speaking in Congress, he committed 20% of the resources that he has in OpenAI to all kinds of regulation and guardrails. And they asked to show that it's actually happening. And they asked OpenAI to also adhere to the same rules that they ask their clients to have. 2 minutes on legal. This is where I get to play the Hallelujah song. Because if you remember in our class, the first class we taught OpenAI, I said one of the things I'm surprised doesn't happen is that there's no crackdown by the DOJ on all the companies that basically have this incest interaction. Reid Hoffman is on the board of Microsoft, but also on the board of OpenAI. And OpenAI is owned by Microsoft partially, but Microsoft also is an investor in Mistral and Inflection. I said that it seems like an incestuous domain with several players controlling the market. And I said I was surprised that no one looks at it as like an antitrust. And indeed, the DOJ started tracking down on that, and they said that they're going to start filing lawsuit in the next 3 months against many companies that they start to see in it. This is why I told you earlier, I think that Microsoft chose to buy 49% of the action, but not above that. This is why they rescinded their control of the board of OpenAI. They moved their observers. They did all kinds of things that kind of start to prepare for what I think would be a big one. I think this will be the story of the next quarter and the first one in 2025. Lawsuits against the big AI companies that kind of set the record straight. Okay. Generally, as the elections are coming closer, we see more and more AI-powered fraud. You can see here the numbers of deep fake fraud attacks that are related to elections, and it's nicely channeling all the elections. You see that almost everywhere there's election in the coming months or in the last couple of weeks, there is massive number of fraud. I think that the US is going to, of course, lead the chart in a few weeks with the election in America. I think that because I know that we have many business leaders in the call, I thought that one interesting take that would be relevant for you guys is the deep fake on Ferrari. A few weeks ago, the CEO of Ferrari called a board meeting quickly by WhatsApp, asked them that he said that he wants to run a quick investment on the call, and basically kind of alerted everyone coming to join a quick meeting. One of the people in the call that was invited to the call said, "I'm sorry, this makes no sense. I ask you to give me the name of the book that you recommended I read 2 days ago." And the guy, of course, didn't know which book he's talking about. And this was a way for the guy to know that it's not the CEO of Ferrari. And he kind of called off this meeting and they caught what it was. I think this is going to happen more and more. So leaders of companies are now no longer kind of shielded behind the company. They're going to be the ones themselves who need to think about ways to protect the companies. Basically, advice: come up with a password that you share with your board right now. When it comes to legal research, it's interesting research that came out. OpenAI published a paper that shows how they can actually tell that a text came from OpenAI with some watermarking. So the idea is that they put some words here and there that they know that if you look for the 100th word from the beginning to the end, it's always a word that has, I don't know, ing, like a walking or talking. Somehow they cleverly put kind of all kinds of rules between the words and allow you to know that this text was made by GPT versus something else. Of course, the biggest threat still is that AI is going to be used in massive warfare. It's something that candidate Trump said he's worried about already. It's something that was flagged by the NSA as one of the biggest threat, and we still think that this could be the biggest thing. Okay, I was going to go to geopolitics, but I already have David here and I want to not miss anything. So I'm going to quickly skip that and want to go straight to the predictions. That's my last 2 minutes before I have David talk to us about how he thinks. But if we have time, I'm going to go geopolitics afterwards. We made a few predictions in the previous sessions. I want to list the ones we got right, the ones we got wrong. NVIDIA stocks, as you probably know, went up. AI legislation, of course, happened. A fight between OpenAI founders indeed happens. We spoke about embodiment as robotics becoming a big field, and it is getting bigger and bigger. DOJ crackdown, we now know, is also happening. Adobe roll. We all said that Adobe is a kind of player that people overlook, but they seem to be bigger and bigger. Indeed, right now, in terms of how they manage the field, they seem to be bigger. Then we said that XAI is still going to be an insignificant player, and they still are, in my mind, an insignificant player. We said also that AI would be implicated with a massive AI election event. So far didn't happen. There's going to be a fight between OpenAI and Microsoft. So far didn't happen. That there's going to be an interface between XAI and Neuralink, and so far didn't happen. There's going to be a major scientific breakthrough that AI will be part of. So far didn't happen. A major crime or large financial problem with AI not happening so far. And a best-selling book written by AI. None of those happen. And I'll share with you the predictions for the coming months. Before that, I'm going to show you that there's a paper that we attached to the slides that you might want to look at that asked 1,000 AI experts what their predictions are. They just kind of gamble on at what point will we have AI that can actually solve problems by itself. And they all had to give a date. And there's a nice paper available out there with just many predictions for people that are experts, positive and negatives. They say things like when there's going to be a first war started by AI, and also when things are going to happen. Here are my predictions for the next quarter. We're going to have a shift to small language models. So more and more the companies who basically test what can you do with less data, with smaller GPUs and so on. And it seems to be doing quite well. I think there's going to be a new niche of fields that are doing that. Essentially, there's one project by one company that showed that you can actually build AI language model for less than $2,000 with very basic technology. If you do algorithms right, the paper is shared in the slides. Look at it. I think there's going to be chief AI officer in every or most of the Fortune 500 companies by the next quarter. DOJ finally will sue Microsoft. This is one of the gamble that everyone is saying, not just me. There's going to be the first public clash between Microsoft and OpenAI around this thing. There's starting to be a lot of copyright trials that will already conclude in the next quarter, and they will set the precedence on how much is the right price for data that companies want to use. Adobe, I'm still gambling on that, will become a leader in the text to video. They're going to enter this space and take over. So it's going to be a leader company in making editing and making videos. China will dominate the video stage with their company Kling, which is basically already offering product, whereas SOA and Hyper and Runway are kind of only beta tested. This one is available for over, I think, 10 million users in China already. I think that we will see the first neural implant connected to AI from Elon Musk. Company is talking about organic processing, as in instead of using a chip, you're going to use tissue that's biological what's called neuromorphic computer are going to start happening more and more. And we're going to see comeback from Intel, AMD, and the likes on actually using this kind of a little bit of like a hit to NVIDIA's, both from the commerce department and from the delays they have internally, that will give rise to another player that is somehow rising back. Finally, I'm gambling on AI services, like auditing, accounting, brand management, even Olympic assessment. If you know what happened in the Olympics, a lot of AI was used to determine things in real time, becoming a big thing. And since I spoke about AI services, it's a good time to introduce our guest today. We're going to talk about that. So my guest today is David Steinberg, who's the CEO of Zeta Global. He's a serial entrepreneur with a number, I think 5 companies over $1 billion on his belt before. He not only kind of runs many companies right now, he does it for the last, I think, 30 years, started in his early 20s from the basement of his Bethesda home, where he basically started his first cell company that in the early 90s kind of took over a market that was unknown. It became a leader company that was later on turning into a massive amount of money. He's taken Zeta public 3 years ago, so kind of now runs one of the leading public companies in the space of marketing. Is the chairman of another various companies before in the past, like Sterling, Infonic, and so on. He sponsors our center at Columbia for Advanced Technology and Human Performance, which of course makes him one of my favorite people when it comes to—
Which is probably the only reason you have me on, but keep going.
Yes, this is all basically everyone here is like just a fake audience that's been created by AI, just so I can actually have you here to feel that you're having a lot of audience here. And I think that in many ways is the person I turn to again and again to get advice and thoughts about the business world overall, and namely about how companies in this scale think about big data, AI, and how they prepare for the future. So that in mind, let's have David join us, and I'll have a few questions to him, and then we have in 20 minutes time for other people to ask questions as well. David, thank you. Are you here?
I'm here, and that was quite the introduction. I appreciate it. The good thing about your accent is I only understood half of it.
Generally, I think that my stress that it's like only 1.5 hours and I have 66 slides made me probably gloss over a lot of those things, and you need to replay this video later on with like half speed.
Slower.
All that.
Yeah, exactly.
And sometimes backwards. There are also hidden messages that I say if you
like the Beatles, exactly.
Okay, so I intentionally in my introduction glossed over what Zeta is doing. I wanted to tell everyone, what is Zeta Global? Tell us about this company. What is the main kind of way by which you describe it?
You know, we're a marketing automation company that's really focused on helping very large enterprises to create, maintain, and monetize customers at a substantially lower cost by using our proprietary data, software, and artificial intelligence. 40% of the Fortune 100 largest companies in the world use our platform. 468 scaled, very large customers. The business is growing rapidly. Last quarter, we organically grew the top line at 33%. We grew our EBITDA at 44%. We grew free cash flow at 53%. And that's because the results we drive for large enterprises around better understanding their marketing and CRM are very superior to our competitors.
You said the word AI in introduction. How is AI part of Zeta? What does it materialize as?
So I sort of joke, we started programming in artificial intelligence 7 or 8 years ago, not 7 or 8 months ago. And in many ways, I sort of joke we were too early to get to the market. In fact, when we went public in June of 2021, we went public on the New York Stock Exchange, and you put a big banner up on the exchange. It's one of the things you do. Our banner literally said data plus AI equals intent. And I used to have to explain to people that the AI was not an AL. It didn't stand for Al, which is a gentleman's name in the US. And Al was not in charge of our data policy. Excuse me. We started with natural language processing. Excuse me. Then we moved into very complex machine learning, right? So how could you ingest larger and larger amounts of information. And in marketing, it's signals. In business intelligence, it's lots of different things. We're in both categories. And how could you process substantially more information than a human could process faster? And that's where it began. And it sort of really evolved from there.
So 7 years ago, you kind of decided that you're going to go AI. Back then, it wasn't really a term that people were kind of looking into. And you told me that you started with language model and you moved along. Right now, we're all talking generative AI. How is generative AI part of Zeta's offering right now?
Well, because we started so much earlier than anybody else, we were already programming in generative AI when, I sort of talk about when OpenAI launched ChatGPT, that was what I call the Renaissance moment in the commercialization of AI, right? It was what took AI from science fiction to boardroom conversation. And when you think about it, that sort of evolution was game-changing for the way that technology is now viewed. At Zeta, we had already been programming in large language models. We used to program on top of Python. We've now gotten a little more complex than that. But when we started building these, it really was not interesting to enterprise clients until really that Renaissance moment. Today, we're the first company I know of that has rolled out a generative AI studio to our clients. So our clients have a studio of generative AI agents that they can literally build on top of their first-party data merged with our data cloud inside of what's called a CDP or consumer data platform, which is sort of the next generation of data warehouse. It sort of allows an enterprise to get down to a consumer record instead of a cluster. And it allows the algorithms to import data from the first-party data source called our enterprise client, merged with our data, and then we're able to import the vast majority of the data on the internet, but with zero data exhaust. One of the biggest things going forward, and what we talk about with large enterprises all the time, is how do they make sure they're on the cutting edge with LLMs? They're in a position where they're able to sort of leapfrog and jump, but without their proprietary data or code or security information being fed back to the other large language models. And we call that data exhaust. And one of the things we've really focused on at Zeta Global is making sure there's no Zeta exhaust. And these generative AI agents that our clients are able to build on top of that data set have been really game-changing. And then our internal people are using it for better function. Somebody asked me in an investor meeting the other day, how did we effectively and organically double the size of our company in the last 3 years? And we only added an incremental 100 employees. And a lot of that was because we eat our own dog food, right? So when we started programming, started, of course, with NLP and machine learning, we started using that for automation of everything. And our whole vision inside of Zeta is how do you automate everything? The generative AI agents sitting inside of a proprietary studio that our enterprise clients and employees can build their own, I think is the next generation of automation.
So actually you took me a different direction, but I'll go with you for a second. How do you get talent? So many of the leaders who are kind of in the call, they heard about AI right now, they want in on the game. I'm going to ask you in a second how they kind of start, but generally, talent is a good place to go. How do you find the 100 people that are good in AI? Where do you find them? I know that you have locations in various countries. Kind of how did you think about it when you said, we're going to go there?
Yeah, so for us, it started with an acquisition. We bought a company called BoomTrain, which was one of the top natural language processing companies in Silicon Valley. But it was too early to the game, right? They were struggling. They had built a model that ingested effectively everything that a publisher would publish, cross-reference that against every individual who was consuming content on their sites, and would make a recommendation on what you should read next. They were charging a lot of money for that because they had to. And publishers were just not in a position to pay for that type of a decisioning engine or recommendation engine. We bought it, and I sat down with the then co-founder, Chris Momberg, who's our CTO, and I said, Chris, I want to completely re-architect the next generation of marketing platform and put natural language processing at the center of it. It was a totally different game. And he was like, wow, that would be really cool. We should do that. And, he's still our CTO today. And, attracting great talent in the engineering ecosystem is different than attracting great sales talent. It's different than attracting great HR talent. It's different than attracting great operating talent, right? With those people, they want to be at a great company. They want to be making really market wages. They want to feel they can create, wealth for them and their families. That I get. Incredible engineering talent, they want to be working on cool stuff, like more than anything, because to them, they're going to make what they're going to make, and it's going to be a lot. And wherever they go, they're going to make the same amount of money. And, you've got to be able to make them feel like what they're doing is changing things. And one of the advantages that operating companies have versus companies that this is all they do is you can talk to this type of talent about, if you come to our organization, not only will you have access to our proprietary data that nobody else sees, but you're going to be able to help us meaningfully change this organization and the way it operates. And that was where we started. We started with, we have this massive proprietary data cloud. I think we're the third largest data cloud in the world now. And you're going to have access to that data. And you're going to be in a position where you're going to help us to change the way the marketing technology landscape looks. And that got people excited. And of course, it becomes a flywheel, right? Because when you get those first 2 or 3 great people, then other people want to join them. And, be prepared to pay up. One of the things I always say is if you want to build a great organization, I'm always willing to pay whatever we need to pay to get the best human capital we can and let them do their jobs.
So I guess you answered 2 of my questions in one. Here's another one that I'm kind of interested in: choosing an AI project. So many of the clients that are that I talk to, banks and organizations, and many of the people who are in the call, they heard about AI. They say, okay, I want into the game. I'm a legal office. I'm a brand manager. Like, how do I start thinking about a project? I know that you had a few projects that you kind of started, and I'm curious, how do you come up with those, or how does it work?
You start with a few, and you're usually wrong, and then you pivot, and you start again, and then you say, oh, that was really cool. You grab the thread, and you really run with it. It's actually not that different from how you would allocate your current engineering resources, right? You're going to have a percentage of resources that are focused on, operating the branches. And then you're going to have a component of your engineering staff that's going to focus on making your ATMs better. And then you're going to have a focus of some staff to run the website, and then personalization engines. And then, most big banks, and we work with many of them, outsource a lot of this function in many cases to us. And we do a lot of that. So the first thing when you're a large enterprise is picking the right partner, right? Who's the right partner? And then you sit down with that partner and say, where's the biggest opportunity in your organization? In many banks, we actually find that personalization engines inside of recognizing their customers when they visit them, whether it's online or in a real world environment, AI is massively helpful there. And we've been deploying that for many years. But when you think about it, I always joke, when we started our internal AI goals, which started like 7 years ago, I said to my team, pull our head count. Where do we spend the most money with the largest number of humans who work for us? And how do we use AI to automate that? And for us, interestingly enough, it wasn't to lower headcount. It was to do what we've really done, which is scale the business. Once again, we grew the business last quarter at 33% top line organically. But at the same time, We added 100 people in the last 3 years. And to put it in perspective, that was from, 1,700 employees to 1,800 employees. My goal is, how do I double the company again and keep the headcount under 2,000? Right? So that starts with, what's the biggest opportunity? It's not always what's the shiniest thing, right? A lot of enterprises start with, let's start with the shiny object. The shiny object is not going to make you as much money. I think if you take, what's your biggest cost center and how do you automate it? So if you're a very large bank, we often start with their call centers, or you start with, how do you make the website substantially more personalized by taking open web data, importing that into the personalization engine, looking at what that person has been reading, researching, and running searches online, and using that as a part of the personalization engine when they enter your proprietary place, once they've entered their credentials. And we've been able to lower the calls, interactions, and visits to locations, in some cases by 30 or 40%. That's how you use AI to drive meaningful increments in productivity.
So you gave me the perfect pitch to any of the clients in the call, kind of to know why they should turn to you if they have a solution.
Well, I mean, listen, that was not the purpose of the pitch. We just are really good at it, so it sort of comes out that way. But there are other companies that can help large enterprises with this stuff as well. I did not mean to get onto the call and do an infomercial for Zeta.
So I was gonna give you a chance to do the opposite. Tell me, what are the biggest mistakes or the biggest challenges that you encounter that people can learn from to avoid in their aims?
I think starting too big too quickly. It's easy to say, how do we build a project that's going to disintermediate our call center? How do we build a project that's going to allow us to shut down all our branches? It's very, very hard to do that type of stuff. And even though AI, I think, is the next big leap in technology, if you step back, you can really, I mean, I'm not going to go back as far as fire, but if you start with, the Gutenberg printing press, you jump to the telegraph, the telephone, the computer, the internet, you've got some really game-changing technology in there. I believe AI is the next leap in that list. And in every case, those things helped information to disseminate faster. It helped information to flow faster. It allowed workforces to flow from highly expensive markets to lower cost markets by being able to move information very freely, very, very quickly, and make it very iterative. I believe AI will do the same things. So if you think about it, and I hate to equate it a bit to the dot-com era, right? But you've got a lot of capital chasing very few deals. My friend Jim Breyer runs Breyer Capital. I mean, a legend in the investment ecosystem and one of the world's nicest guys. Jim, ran Excel, the seed round investor in Facebook, seed round investor in Instagram, on the board of Walmart, on the board of Facebook. Like, he's a real guy. He would tell you that when you look at this type of stuff, it's step functions, right? It doesn't go from 0 to 120 miles an hour. And you have to really look at how the technology is going to evolve and where it's going. He's speaking at our Zeta Live conference on the 26th. He's on our AI panel. And he really talks about AI in a way that I find incredibly fascinating, because he's looking at it as you've got all of this capital coming in. And Jim would tell you there are less than 5,000 people on the planet who are true AI architects. Now, there's 8 billion people on the planet. And I forget if his number was 5,000 or 6,000 people. He would tell you that those 5,000, 6,000 people today, pick a number 6,000 because it's easier, it's even. 3,000 of them are in academia and have nothing to do with business. So thank you, Moen, for giving back. You'd probably be one of them. You then have another 3,000 people. 2,000 of them work at Facebook, Google, Palantir. They're taken. So now you've got 1,500 people who might start a company that really, those 1,500 people, if they sent out a business plan today, could raise any amount of money at any value. But then you've got thousands more that are starting companies, right? And they're sort of piggybacking on that. So you have this massive amount of capital trying to find great deal flow, and they're just deploying capital very, very rapidly. Now let's jump away from Jim, because I'm not sure Jim would agree with what I'm about to say. You know, you're going to have too much capital chasing too few deals, which is going to result in what could be seen as a bit of a bubble. And you're going to see a blow up. But what happened during the dot-com blow up? Well, the companies that came through it were Apple, Microsoft, Facebook, Instagram. Like, you could look at some of the greatest companies, Amazon, some of the greatest companies ever to exist came through the blowing up of that bubble. Why? Because they had the capital they needed, they had built profitable businesses, and they were able to benefit from a massive release of human capital. No competition for many years could raise money, and they sort of came through that. I don't think we're going to go through a burst like we did in the dot-com bubble, because you also simultaneously had the real estate bubble. Government was over-levered. Well, they're still over-levered, but there's a lot of other things going on at that time. But I do think you're going to see a big blow up there, which will free up human capital for companies that are not AI companies. It'll be for banks, and it'll be for retailers, and it'll be for other enterprises. If you're working on that stuff and you can create an environment where, you know, they can come work on cool stuff. And after that blow up, nobody wanted to work for a startup for many, many years. Everybody was gun shy. Now, 10 years later, the startup environment came back, and now it's sort of redoing itself again. Now it's 25 years later, but at the same time, that cycle appears to be repeating itself, in my opinion.
So actually, you took me in a different direction, but I'm curious about that. You also are an investor, both through Zeta and personally. If someone comes to you and says,
I don't invest personally. I'm the chairman of an investment fund called Cavis Investment Corp, where when deals come to me, I bring it to the fund, and then the fund makes a decision, because I don't want to be in a position where I'm in a conflicting situation while a public company CEO.
So you may tell me that you don't kind of have a say on this one, because maybe you say...
No, I have a say. Okay. And I'm allowed to have a say, and we disclose I have a say, but I just don't do it out of my pocket, is my point. We do it out of a fund. It's a little more cohesive. But yes, we do meaningful investment into startups that have no competitive nature to what we do at Zeta Global.
So my question is, someone comes to you with an AI company. Is the way you evaluate the offering, the way you think about them, any different than anything else? Or you say it's a company, and I think about the team, the idea, whatever?
So the answer is no. We look at it like any other business opportunity to invest in a company. Now, that being said, today, I think it's a very, very big tailwind, right? So, you know, I laughed when I started my first company. When I started my first company, I was 16. My first real company that I founded, which was Sterling Cellular, I was 22 years old. I made so many mistakes that we would have been out of business 100 times if we hadn't been in the wireless space when it was growing by 100% a year. So, you know, 101 is pick a very fast growing market, because it allows a lot more latitude for mistakes. AI right now is very fast growing. It is questionable to me if there are going to be a ton of winners in the AI for AI's sake, right? Like, so you've got a lot of enterprises that are building customized stuff on top of other large language models. I haven't seen a lot of organizations that are built on third-party tech really create meaningful exits. I'm sure it's happened. I'm not saying it doesn't occasionally happen. But, you know, if you were traditionally building your product on top of Microsoft, or you were traditionally building your product on top of Adobe or Salesforce, they were the ones capturing the value there, right? So if you're building on top of Llama, or you're building on top of OpenAI, I'm not sure you're going to create a game-changing company, which is not to say you can't build a good company. My thought process, I'm sure I'll get hate mail for this later, but it's sort of how I look at it. And then you're going to have a lot of enterprises building their own LLMs. When we talk about that, the way I like to talk about that is back about 100 years ago, there were 3,000 companies manufacturing cars in the United States of America. Now they're 5. So, I think you're going to have some LLMs that are really going to win, and they're going to win big. You're going to have some companies that are going to build their own proprietary tech for specialty stuff. Like I'm looking at stuff where we just invested in a company we thought was incredibly cool, that's building language models to help law firms more efficiently manage their billing process. Because 25% of all lawyers' time, according to these guys, go to how do they bill? And the more successful the lawyer, the more likely they are to employ 1, 2, or 3 full-time people to just manage their billable hours. These guys are building an automated process to do all of that. To me, that's very interesting. Even though I don't think it's going to be the next Microsoft, I do think it's going to be a very interesting company, and I really like the team, so it's something we do.
I'm going to note that we have 15 more minutes, so if people want to start putting questions in the Q&A, I'm going to, in a second, head to them. Before that, I have a few more questions to David, and then we're going to turn to you guys. So just know that you can now start throwing questions either to me or to David via one of the interfaces. Here are my last 2 or 3 questions to you, David. Question 1, how do you personally keep updated? So the world of AI changes so fast. I didn't know what GPT-4o comes, and then you have to learn a new one. How do you kind of keep updated with all the things that happen so fast?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, there's a lot of ways of keeping up. The easiest way for everybody to keep up is follow in Warren Buffett's footsteps and just read a lot. And one of the good things for me and bad things for my wife is I don't sleep much. So I wake up every day, thank you. I wake up every day and I tend to, I wake up around 5 a.m. I spend the first 3 or 4 hours of my day consuming content. Everything from the Wall Street Journal, the Business Insider, to Wired, to the Financial Times, the New York Times, Washington Post, you name it, I read it every morning. And excuse me. I then read different trade publications. I consume white papers. I read a lot. That's first. Second, I did something really interesting a number of years ago personally, and I was very fortunate to be in a position to do it. We started backing seed funds, so funds that do seed rounds. And the condition of getting my family office to come in and do that was, we had to really think highly of the person who was running it, because that's how seed funds work, right? If you're doing seed or A, B, and A round investments, you better be really juiced in, right? And B, I would say, I will come into your round. You can tell everybody I'm an LP if you want. But in exchange, I want a 1-hour Zoom. At the time, we would do it as meetings. Now we do it as Zooms or FaceTimes, depending on who it is, every month, with what you're seeing in the marketplace, what's new. And, and what happened is I've become very close to some of these funds, and, some of these guys have gotten very big. And, I just spend an hour Zoom. And it turned from them teaching me for an hour to they ask me questions for half an hour. I ask them questions for half an hour. We're friends, we go back and forth. But I mean, Moran, listen, that one of the first things I did when I got to know you was I said, listen, I'd love to back what you guys are doing, but I need an hour to 2 hours a month of your time. I want to learn from everything you're seeing and everything you're doing. There's nobody I know in the world who's smarter on this stuff than you. And, that was one of the deals we made. Right now, it worked out nicely that we usually do it over a great bottle of wine or a good meal. or our wives are chatting in the corner while we're doing this. But at the same time, that was sort of part of our deal, right? The different answer to the question too is people ask me all the time, and I'm sure they do you too, right? What drives you at this point in your life? And to me, it is just a never-ending sort of intellectual curiosity. I always want to learn more. I mean, and I'm learning about some of the stupidest stuff you can imagine on a daily basis because I find it interesting, right? So I go off on a tangent and I'll get lost in an hour trying to figure out a geometry question, or art really interests me, and I'll go off on art, and I'll sort of get lost, and I'll miss a meeting, and my team will come grab me. Why are you not in this meeting? And I'll be reading something about something that has nothing to do with any of this stuff, just because I'm interested in it. But it sort of is what it is.
So you said something earlier that I kind of made a note for myself to ask you about. You said that engineers are the type of people who get lost in a problem and they do it for the sake of this thing. What are you, David? Business person, engineer, salesperson? What kind of give me what makes David happy?
Well, I just spent 5 days with my 3 older kids. I have 3 older kids and 2 younger kids, and they would tell you I'm an idiot. So I don't know, but if you ever really want to humble yourself, just get together with your early 20s kids, late teens kids for a few days. Listen, I mean, I don't know the exact answer to that question. I've actually not contemplated it. It's actually a very good question, and I'm going to think about it over the next few days, and I'll give you a good answer, which probably doesn't help this audience. But what I would say is, at my heart, the things I like best are learning and creating relationships. Because to me, relationships are the key to my happiness. My family, my friends. I'm like friends with some of the world's most interesting people, which is awesome because I can get together with them. I can learn from them. They now want to learn from me. We can do it over great bottles of wine and great food. And I really enjoy that. But from a professional perspective, the best way to probably describe me as I think about it is I'm a technologist. I started in the wireless business in 1990. I started in the data and automation business in 2007, going into big data. And we started in AI from a thematic perspective in 2017. So I've always been a guy personally that's been lucky enough to see where the puck was going, if you understand the analogy. They asked Wayne Gretzky, who's the greatest hockey player in history, how are you? I mean, you look at Wayne Gretzky, he's a skinny, not incredibly talented athlete, the greatest hockey player in the history of the world. And he said, well, I just don't really understand it. But when I get on the ice, I skate to where the puck is going. Everybody else skates to where the puck is. And I think that's the sign of a great technologist. And listen, I've been wrong a lot, but I've been right often enough that I am on my 7th company, and we seem to be doing pretty well.
I agree. I got a few questions, both in the Q&A and personally, that I will ask you in different domains. One is about politics. It's an election year. All companies start to think about how the election affects them. How is Zeta impacted by the election, both before and maybe after?
Well, it's a loaded question. So at Zeta, we do have a political division to our company. So we do, we call it advocacy, but we do help parties, candidates, and other advocacy campaigns to better manage their marketing and deploy their marketing. And I think Wall Street is expecting us to have a certain amount of our revenue in the 3rd and 4th quarter be associated with that. And we've publicly said we think Wall Street right now is conservative on that front. So we do see political campaigns as a business opportunity if we're going to step out of that. And I try to stay apolitically, I try to stay apolitical publicly. Privately, I'm very not apolitical, so I have to be careful publicly because we do work on both sides of the aisle for all different types of elections in this country and others. This country being, sitting in America right now in New York. But I think if you look at the two candidates in the United States, certainly, Biden stepping down and Kamala becoming the candidate has changed the election radically here. And quite frankly, even I was surprised by what an exceptional job I think Kamala Harris has done, consolidating power, really taking the reins of the Democratic Party, putting forth a very different message from what her predecessor was. And I think a lot of it, listen, I think people globally want change in leadership. I'm on the board of the French American Business Council. I was sort of joking. I was over in France for the 80th anniversary of the landing of Normandy. Then we had a series of meetings with President Macron. Then I attended the state dinner at the Palace Élysée that Macron hosted for Biden. It was just a pretty cool weekend. And then Monday, Macron dissolved his government. So literally a lot of my friends were like, what did you do over there? Like, you really managed to screw this up. And, I'm very friendly with President Macron and I'm very friendly with President Biden. So they're like, I know both of them well. I'm not as friendly with President Trump or, former President Trump, whatever you're supposed to call him. But, at the same time, I think both parties have a very interesting story to the country. And I think President Trump obviously won the presidency a couple of times ago, and he's putting forth a very strong campaign with the messages he's trying to get forth. He's trying to position himself as very pro-business and paint Kamala Harris as not pro-business. And I think Kamala Harris is putting herself forward as a conservative Democrat, which is what I think a lot of people want today. But you've got an age thing here, right? So you had President Trump calling President Biden, the older candidate, and that worked until she came in, and now she's what passes for incredible youth in today's American policy, even though she's almost 60. There's no Kennedys on the well, there's one Kennedy, but I'm not sure we want him. But there's no sort of Joe Kennedys out there, or say Jack Kennedy, but Joe was his dad. But the reality is that there's nobody really in their 40s at this point who's really ascending. So late 50s is what passes for youth in the United States. If you look at what's happened in Great Britain, people change parties, right? This party has not given us what we need. Let's try another one. France saw a very similar thing, where it was moving very hard right. Macron pulled one of, in my opinion, the smartest political moves I've ever seen, yanking his candidates out so the far left could win enough that the far right didn't get the full thing. And now he's putting together a coalition. So I think you've got a lot going on. Now, as it relates to AI, you've got a lot of sort of, I would say, bad actors trying to use artificial intelligence to syndicate information that is false, blatantly false. And we saw as recently as last week, it appears as if groups that are based in Iran hacked President Trump. And whether you like him or you hate him, we can't have that. Like, we can't have third parties hacking our major parties' nominees. I mean, we don't hack anything, but the fact that that happened and they tried to hack the Harris campaign, my understanding is they didn't get in one, they got in the other, and the FBI is now very tough. Right? But, we're going to have to start thinking about AI protection in addition to AI syndication of bad information. And I continue to wonder why we don't have better tools that can just right across the information is huge. This is fake, is what we're going to need to get to, not like a very small thing at the bottom that says this information is political in nature and might not be correct. And I think we're going to have to move to that in the years to come. I don't think we'll get there for this cycle, but I worry about it if we don't.
I have one last question. I have many that I won't get to. Here's one that follows on this topic. I know that you're very kind of involved with the policymakers. You know many of them. You sit in many boards of DARPA and the likes. There's one question that came, I think, in 3 different versions in the question I got about regulation in the US. Right now, there's almost nothing. It gives the US a boost. Do you think it's going to change in the next year in terms of?
I don't think there's anybody in American business who would look at the current Federal Trade Commission and say there's no regulatory industry. It's I think most people, yeah, I think, listen, there's no question that if you look at the United States versus the EU versus other components of Asia, the US has taken a more hands-off regulatory approach to the development of new technologies. And if you think about that, it does give an incredible advantage to the entities that are growing and building in this country. And if you look at what the EU passed this week, I logged on just as you were talking about that. I just don't, there's no real regulating AI at this point. You can regulate the outputs and you can ultimately fight over the inputs, right? I think you're right on that prediction, by the way. I don't know how you regulate the development of the technology, right? And if you try to, really what you're going to do is you're going to hamper the free flow of capital to entities that are trying to grow in your region versus others. So if I'm an investor and I want to deploy capital into cutting edge artificial intelligence, I'm going to go to the markets where I believe the companies I invest in are going to have the least regulatory hampering in their growth. It's just sort of the way it works. So when you look at the EU, and I don't comment on decisions any regulatory bodies make, but if you look at what's happening in the EU, let's step back for 1 second. I was in France. It's actually a year ago last week. I was at a meeting and I was introduced to the cabinet minister for artificial intelligence for Dubai. You might have been at that meeting, I don't recall. And the first thing I was shocked by a year ago was that there is a cabinet minister for artificial intelligence in Dubai. The second thing that I almost fell out of my seat from, he was named to that exact titled role 5 years prior to that. So this guy was named, he wasn't named technology and they changed the name. He was named the cabinet minister of artificial intelligence 6 years ago. And somebody asked him why. And he said, because when the Gutenberg printing press came out, the 6 main countries in the Middle East were the largest economy in the world when the Gutenberg printing press was first invented. I don't know if Europe was collectively second, probably was third to China, maybe fourth to China and other, South America, who knows? Those 6 countries collectively, and I'm paraphrasing because this is a year ago and I can barely remember what I had for breakfast, but those 6 countries, largest economy on the earth collectively, made the Gutenberg printing press illegal for 182 years. In that 182 years, they fell from the #1 economy in the world to the 4th largest economy in the world, and their poverty rates skyrocketed, and it literally was amongst the worst decisions, if you were to do a case study on it, in the history of technology. Now, skip ahead 200 years, they didn't want to make that mistake again. And Dubai wrapped their hands around AI to the level of a cabinet minister. to me, that's what you want in government oversight. Like you want government saying, and by the way, this is not like I'm saying Dubai is the greatest country. It's obviously not even a country. It's a municipality as a part of the United Arab Emirates. And I go there frequently for a whole host of reasons around business. But, you know, I'm sure they've got some good, some bad. But that particular story is always stuck in my mind. When I speak to regulators, which I do regularly, I love to tell them that story.
David, as always, it's a pleasure talking to you. We're running out of time. I can do it forever. And in fact, I will, because I'm going to quickly show the slide. I don't think if you can see my slide. Where is this? Here it is. As David mentioned earlier, the biggest gathering of Zeta customers, employees, partners happens in about a month, September 26th in New York, and is graciously offered to the first 100 people who would sign up after this call with the code ZLSA24, entry ticket to this fancy event, which I highly recommend. If you want to hear more of David, if you want to hear of some of the people like Jim Breyer that were mentioned in the call, excluding myself, this is the place to be.
We'll have our three keynotes are Shaquille O'Neal, Michael Milken, and Deepak Chopra. We have 40 Fortune 500 CMOs coming. We have the global head of AI from McKinsey. We have Jim Breyer, who's one of the top guys in the world on AI. We've got Moran on our AI panel. You know, AI will be a big, big component, but sort of the evolution of business intelligence, the evolution of marketing, the evolution of technology will be very, very featured. The event will kick off. I'll give you a little inside baseball with my buddy Jim Lorb, who's the CEO of Yahoo and was one of the guys who has built the technology ecosystem. And then we're going to close with my friend Michael Casson. Michael, who is probably the most powerful guy in the marketing space, built MediaLink, and is really, really an interesting guy. And then we'll have Mike Milken and Deepak Chopra talking about spirituality. It's going to be a really amazing day. It's a closed event. We're doing a special thing for Moran and his people. So the first 100 can get entry for free. There's no cost to this. And hopefully it'll be of value to the people who are able to attend in New York City, Midtown on September 26th. The location will be given out after you'll submit your application, and then we'll approve it. But the first 100 will be entered in.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you, everyone, for spending the 1.5 hour rapid pace to what's happening in AI. And I'm going to close by giving you a taste of what's ahead of us. In the next 3 months, we're going to have the election, of course. A lot of updates are going to happen, I'm sure, in the world of AI. As our guest next time, we're going to have Gary Marcus, who was one of the people who testified before Congress on where AI is going. And he's going to mention the election and how he thinks about that. That in mind, I'm going to end and let you enjoy the song that AI wrote for this session as you go back to your work. Thank you very much for this time.
When you walk into the lecture and you're feeling kind of tense, Professor Cerf is talking about our work intelligence. Artificial general is the name of the game. Breaking down the current tests will never be the same. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. It's so smart and engaging. AI's future. Rearranging, boosting business, decision making, Cerf's class, in the shaving. Every turn he drops just feels like you're gold. Neural networks talk to stories he's told. Dive into the depths of machine-made choices and leave with clearer minds and more confident voices. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. Knowledge so smart and engaging. AI's future. Rearranging, boosting business. Decision making, Cerf's class minds. in the shaping. Columbia holds filled with excitement, burning past with grand enlightenment. Ancient dreams we are awaiting, in Cerf's course with reshaping. So small, future. Stay